Welcome to Search for Signs. My name is Gary Willing. If this information interests you, please press the like and subscribe button and press the bell for notifications.
Well, guess what? It's May 19th. And if you have a question about Maitreya or the Masters of Wisdom, please feel free to ask me that question by posting your question as a comment, and I do recommend posting it in the most recent video. Or you can email me night or day, any day of the week, at searchforsigns@mail.com, and I'll do my best to answer it. And again, if you can, refrain from asking me my opinion about somebody else. That would be awesome. Don't feel it's my place to do that. Now, let's get into it. All right. Glamour's narcissism. Or no, it doesn't say glamour is narcissism, just glamour hyphen narcissism. Well, that's true. Or narcissism, it should be, maybe it's the other way. Narcissism is glamour. Yes, that's true. Pretty much everything that humanity does, says, thinks, or especially feels, is glamour. Because that's why, and it all comes from the fact that we believe we're separate. But it's nice to know, and this is coming from Benjamin Creme's master, it's just a phase. It's just a phase that's lasted millions of years, apparently. So, but it's a phase that will eventually end, and humanity will live a lot less without glamour and see life more for what it is for the real. So that's kind of cool. All right, next comment or question. There we go. Emily Cappy. I like everything you said about glamour. Really? Okay. I guess I didn't do a good enough job. I think it's important and something not often discussed. Oh, well, that makes more sense. Thanks, Emily. A funny story about Benjamin Creme. He told everybody this one time when he was talking about glamour. But Benjamin Creme was from Scotland, but he lived in London for a long time. So you couldn't really tell he was from Scotland, but he did a really good imitation of a Scot. And so he was saying after one of these lectures, and I think it was in London, this guy from Scotland came up to him at the end of the lecture. He goes, and I can just imagine a Scot saying this, right? He looks at Ben, and all he said to Ben was, "I've got glamour, and I hate glamour." Yeah, Emily, the reason why you like everything I said about glamour is because I'm just as glamored as everybody else. When Benjamin Creme talked about glamour, it was like, ooh, I don't like what you say at all. Benjamin Creme's master spent, years and years and years working with him for hours at a time about deglamorizing himself and also about not looking at life through illusion. Because once you get through a glamour, then you got to deal with illusion. So Benjamin Creme used to say, that's what you got to look forward to. So, no, he goes, you got that to look forward to. Anyway, but glamour is just the illusion on the astral planes. And then on the mental planes is illusion. What we see is not real, especially when it comes to time and distance and space and, that kind of stuff. So, but the masters are coming back to here to help us through that process, which will make it quicker for us. Like I said, this phase of glamour has been hanging around for a long time. So for the master to say, well, you know what? Eventually we'll all get through it. Now, another story, too, about Benjamin Creme, because he used to, I would say something around him sometimes, and he would just shake his head or put his hand in his face and go, "Gary, that is glamour." And, it would take me sometimes years to come to the same conclusion that he said, right? But this one time, he was talking about a coworker that unfortunately has passed away, but had nothing but 6 in his makeup. And so the 6 ray has a tendency to be it's not the most glamored, but it's definitely the most pronounced glamours. And it's very easy for other people to see, not so much for that person. And so Benjamin Creme used to always say the 6 ray was the ray that cracks a nut with a sledgehammer, but it also needed to have its head whacked, to get to see the reality of things, because you can't be subtle with somebody like that, because it will just go right past them. They have to see it on a billboard. It has to be massive, for them to see, oh, that's what you're talking about, right? So it's kind of like my bulldog. We used to bite my feet, and I had to smack her in the head, and she found like, oh, I guess you don't like that, right? So this guy was definitely was a bulldog in a lot of ways. But anyway, Benjamin Creme was making fun of his glamours to me and listing them all off. And I looked at him and I said, with the exception of, there was one glamour maybe I didn't have. Anyway, but most of them I had, right? Anyway, so I looked at him and I said, "Ben, I have every one of those glamours." Right? But his master could look through him and he said sometimes just a look from him could be a look from his master. That's how the connection, how deep and easy the connection was for his master to see through Ben. And he called Benjamin Creme's master, referred to him as this window in the world. He could actually send a healing through Benjamin Creme to a person, or a touch or a handshake or even a hug could be coming from his master and not from Ben, and that kind of stuff. And if you knew Ben for as long as I did, you sometimes could tell, when it was not coming from him, it was coming from his master. It sounded different. The energy was different in his words and everything. And this one time when he was talking about this guy's glamour, that was Ben. But when I said to him, I said, I have every one of those glamours, right? And it was hard for me to admit that to myself, let alone to him, right? But I knew he knew it. But I think it was his master that looked at me and says, Gary, you'll get it. Don't worry. And that simple phrase that he said has gotten me through a lot of the pain and agony and the suffering of trying to, of finally recognizing my own glamours. But Benjamin Creme's master said in his last article that I read about glamour, he said that's just a phase. Eventually humanity will get through it. So we'll all get through it, right? Anyway, next question. Where and when was Maitreya on TV? Maitreya started... Well, the announcement that Maitreya was on TV was made by Benjamin Creme in January 2010, so 10 years ago, okay? Now, one thing that I've been thinking about here recently, because, he never said that that Maitreya's first interview was in January of 2010. It could have been a ways early, it could have been a long time earlier than that. And so he might have been holding on to it for a time, and then made the announcement after that. But when he made the announcement, there was an English gentleman named Raj Patel, who was Indian, who had given an interview on PBS not too, long before Benjamin Creme made that announcement. So everybody, just flocked to Raj Patel. That was him, right? And it really took Raj Patel by surprise. You could tell, and he had no idea about what people were talking about when they referred to him as Maitreya. And then there's a whole group of people that thought that he was, of course, the Antichrist and didn't want to hear what he had to say and all that kind of stuff. Well, Maitreya is not going to confirm it nor deny it when asked if he's Maitreya. So Raj Patel definitely said, I'm not Maitreya. I have no idea what you're talking about. But, and I'm sorry to laugh, but it's been long enough where we can laugh about this. Now, Peter, I will say this, even if I knew where and when Maitreya was giving interviews on TV, the name he was using and so forth, it's important for none of us to say it because of the fact that I would be depriving you of the opportunity and the gift to recognize Maitreya for yourself. And so I'm never going to do that. So people ask me that all the time. When can I see it? Are there videos about it and I can see? Unfortunately, even if I knew it, even if I could tell you the name that he was using, I was told not to say it, so I'm not going to say it. Now, I will mention this a couple things, because there's a article I do want to read from Benjamin Creme's master where he talks about this a little bit, so hopefully this will help answer your question, Peter. But, there's 3 likely scenarios about the reason why Maitreya has been on TV for 10 years and nobody has really, there's not been thousands of people or millions of people that are recognizing him as something other than just a person, okay? So, according to Benjamin Creme's master, he's been on TV and he is having an effect on people. And people are starting to take to heart what he's saying and internalizing it and looking at the truth of what he's saying. Now, the 3 likely scenarios is Benjamin Creme was totally delusional and there is no Maitreya. It's a figment of his imagination. It's like Maitreya is the second cousin to Harvey the Rabbit. And then people such as myself just wanted to believe it. Okay, so I'm just throwing it out there on the table for you to consider. I don't believe that to be the case. I've had enough experiences, with Maitreya that I know that it's the validity of it, but you don't. You can't. You have to just kind of take me at my word, or not. You know what I mean? Is what my point is. Okay. So, but I'm putting that on the table for something to consider. Okay. Now, the second thing is that when people start to recognize him, they will look at Maitreya and go, I've never seen that man before. And that could be an option. But there's also this other option that it hasn't, it's kind of been a recent thought that I had, and I've talked about it in a few videos. But so it's been, a little while since I've had this idea. But the other idea is, and this is just an idea to consider as a possibility, is when you and I and everybody recognize him, we will see him and go, I've seen that man before, or I recognize that name, or I even heard him talk the other day and didn't realize it, that kind of thing. And so he doesn't look anything like the photo of him, how he appeared in Nairobi, Kenya. Now, the energy's the same, the eyes would be the same, but he might look totally different. He might not have a beard, he might be lighter in skin, he might be darker in skin. I don't know. So he looks how he looks. Now, I think Benjamin Creme, when asked, he said he would look about 80% of how he normally would look once he's known for who he is. So he is definitely going to change the way that he looks eventually and look more how he looks, how he looked in London. But for right now, he looks different. Because these masters can look however they want to look, and so he could be shorter, he could be taller, he could, I don't know. You got blonde hair. I mean, I don't know how he looks. Now, I have a friend who I trust who mentioned something that when she was doing an outreach here in Atlanta, a woman who she did not know came up to her and said that she had recognized, she saw the picture of him in Nairobi, Kenya. She looked and she goes, I've seen that man on TV. And she goes, he does not look like him, and he is not talking about sharing the world's resources or those kind of things. He was talking about politics. But she said it was something about the heartfelt message of what he was saying and the truth behind his words, that this woman had a heartfelt response, and that was Maitreya. And that's what Maitreya wants. And so when humanity is ready, our representatives in the media, and you can have your opinion about what the media is today, and I get it, it is just as flawed as everything else in the world, but it's just eventually our representatives will start to ask him questions that he will start to get more recognized as being Maitreya. But right now they might not be asking him questions about that because humanity probably isn't totally ready. And then the other thing is, most people don't know what it took for Maitreya just to be on TV, the laws that had to be fulfilled, in humanity's, from the point of our perspective of humanity, what it took for us to be ready for him to come out on TV after 100,000 years of these masters living in their ancient retreats, and not being direct with humanity, working indirectly with their, with humanity through their disciples. People don't understand, and I don't even understand it, but it was a massive undertaking. And if we were to step back and look at it from space, and see the timeline from when the masters actually left the public eye and went into their retreats of the mountain regions like the Himalayas and the Andes and the Rockies and those kind of things, the Gobi Desert, and the process that it took over that 100,000 years for humanity to get to the point where we're at today, to where they could come back. If you looked at it from a broad perspective, even Jesus and the Buddha were a part of the reappearance of the Christ. It's not a mystical event. It's a huge, huge undertaking. And Benjamin Creme's master talks about it in the article that I'm going to read. So hopefully that helps. Now, on to the next question. Now, I am going to read I'm going to read the response to this, because this cracked me up, because Tracy reminded me of me sometimes when I would ask questions of Benjamin Creme. Do animals have various other souls or human souls? They actually have. Oh, and the other thing I was going to say, I said something about good question. We'll discuss this in my next video. Have a great night, Tracy. And she said, finally a good one. I remember one time in San Francisco at the conference, Benjamin Creme would read one of his master's articles, and then he would go in depth about what the master was talking about, and then the people in the group would ask him questions, and then he would answer the questions. That's how the conference went. And I remember writing this down, and I had like 4 questions. Oh, these are so good. These are the questions, right? These are really good questions. And when I wrote it to him, he made such a huge ordeal. This person thinks these are the most wonderful questions. He never mentioned my name, right? He just went on and on and on about it. And even though he didn't mention me by name, I was quite embarrassed about it. But ironically the funny thing was he actually, those were the only questions he answered that conference, were the questions that I had. So apparently I had some good questions too. But I remember feeling, He's going to like this one. But that was what his response was to me. Yes, animals actually have their own soul. So there's a soul of shark, of great white shark. There's a soul of dog. So when an animal passes away, their soul is absorbed back into that soul of dog or camel or ox or whatever. They're not individualized the way that we're individualized. That's the difference between humanity and animal. Now, I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, but the higher elements of the mineral kingdom are those elements that are radioactive, and they're starting to move into the the vegetable kingdom. Excuse me. So the vegetable kingdom is basically, it owes its body to the mineral kingdom, okay, because it feeds off the nutrients of the soil and so forth. And then as a plant evolves, it eventually becomes more of the floral plants that emit an odor or a color, that kind of thing. Those are the higher evolved of all the vegetable kingdoms. So all the weeds and plants and trees and everything like this, the highest evolved of them are flowers and those plants that emit an odor or a floral look to it. And the animal kingdom owes its body to the vegetable kingdom. Now, out of all the animals, from slugs to, dogs and cats and oxen and camels and, those kind of things, and elephants, horses, the highest evolved of all animals are those that respond to human thought, which are domesticated animals. So those, cats, dogs, those kind of things, those are the highest evolved of all of them. And then, but the door between the animal kingdom and the human kingdom has been sealed for a while. And it was sealed when all of us individualized 18.5 million years ago, when we moved in from the animal kingdom and became what we know as man, even though we don't think the way that we think today. That door had been shut, and eventually it will be opened up again, and more animals will start to individualize, but for right now it's been shut. So I hope that answers your question. And then also too, then there's various gradations of humanity, right, all the way up to the highest level of humanity emits a spiritual light of the soul. Now, you wouldn't be able to see it with your naked eye. You'd have to have the vision to be able to see that light. But those, like, for instance, Leonardo da Vinci, there's a reason why millions of people go every year to the Louvre to see this very simple, small color, painting with not a lot of color, and are drawn to it every year because it was because of who Leonardo da Vinci is and the light that's emanating from that painting. So eventually, we will all become totally light, and so these masters, even though they look physical, when you see Maitreya on TV, his body looks just as physical as yours or mine. His body is made up of nothing but light. So that's the difference between the two of them. Anyway, so then lastly, I'm going to answer this question real quick, and then we're going to go into reading Benjamin Creme's Master's article, okay? All right. James Paluta. I was wondering what ray Shiva and Archangel Michael are on. Is there a protector ray? Also, what ray do you think bipolar peeps fit in, or peeps that can rage at a switch? I would say probably people that are rage at a switch would probably be more of somebody with a 6-ray astral vehicle and is very focused in their astral vehicle and thinks that they're, it's not so much a ray, but where the person's focused. But bipolar, I've always thought it was a 4th ray type of problem because of the fact that the person goes from one side to the other, that kind of thing. So the 4th ray is kind of bipolar in a way, because but in terms of the bipolarness, that would be the closest I could get to answering that question, I think. But bipolar is probably found on all the rays. It's just on where the person's focus is, and are they balanced or not, I guess is more like it. Is there a protector ray? Wow, I think all of them probably. It just depends on the person, Maybe a 2nd ray. 2nd ray people just seem to be very protective, kind of motherly sometimes. I was wondering what ray Shiva was on. Shiva, Brahma, and Vishnu are the Hindu version of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, or in the esoteric terms, will, love, and wisdom. So Shiva is will. In terms of Archangel Michael? I don't know. Nobody ever asked Benjamin Creme that question, so I couldn't answer that question. I do apologize. So let's get on to Benjamin Creme's Master's article, and then we'll call it a day. All right. All right. So this is talking about Maitreya, and it's found on page 105 of A Master Speaks, Volume 2. There's actually been 2 volumes of A Master Speaks. See him and rejoice. So this also kind of answers a little bit about what Peter Miller was asking, okay? Many times over the years have I said that Maitreya was emerging quote-unquote soon, and thus has his expectation been kept vividly alive in the hearts of millions. That his full emergence has not yet taken place is not a sign of perfidy on my part, but rather a result of the extraordinary nature and difficulty of this enterprise. Men in general know nothing of the laws which govern such an event, nor of the boundaries to Maitreya's actions which these laws create. Also, we, your elder brothers, work outside and beyond the notion of time, and find difficulty in placing our insights and information before men whose understanding is still governed by the quote-unquote fact of time. Nevertheless, when all is said, this present quote-unquote time should be seen by men as the anteroom in which Maitreya patiently awaits the signal to emerge openly onto the world's stage. The present chaotic conditions, especially in the economic and financial fields, have tipped the scales and made possible a decision on a period which men themselves would welcome as soon. It will not be long, therefore, until the great Lord begins his open mission, albeit undeclared. Watch and wait, with a sure understanding of his priorities, and so miss him not. Now, will humanity view this extraordinary man like none seen in recent memory, yet obviously one of us? How will men respond to the simple truth of his utterance? And how quickly will men respond to his analysis of their plight? It is not possible to know precisely how men will react on first experience of Maitreya. The great Lord will be circumspect and relatively restrained on first appearance, lest he drive away those who need time to evaluate his thoughts and judge his relevance. Soon, however, many will gather around him, eager to see adopted the changes he advises. They, in their turn, will stir their brothers and sisters to consider these seminal ideas and to launch a crusade for sanity in world affairs. These ideas, requiring a complete reconstruction of our present way of life, will gradually appear more logical, more practical, and achievable than first they may have seemed. And so a great wave of enthusiasm for sharing and right relationships will sweep across the world. Maitreya himself will potentize the natural stirrings of right thinking among the nations, and will work to foster the growing public yearning for a new direction. Thus will Maitreya work through men to sow the seeds of a new garden. Thus will he engender in men a longing for the real and the true, for the manifestation of love and justice. In this way does the great Lord serve humanity, showing them the way to live within the spiritual laws. Thus will the Lord of love reveal himself to men as a brother, a friend, a way-shower, a traveler, like them on the way. See him soon, then, and rejoice. Join his ranks and serve. Awaken through him to your divinity. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.